Welcome to the Blue Dot, Northern Kentucky's premier political podcast, brought to you by the Kenton County Democratic Executive Committee. Welcome back to the Blue Dot podcast, where we talk about the kitchen table topics that matter most to those in our community. Thanks for listening. I'm Natalie MacDonald.
And I'm Brian Koehl. On our last podcast, we were joined by Dr. Chris Bowling to gain perspective on the attacks on science and medicine from a medical perspective. These cuts and misinformation attacks have real-world implications that affect people all across the country.
Yeah, they sure do, Brian. And sometimes it really doesn't hit home until it affects someone you love. So today we'll be joined by a brilliant and extraordinary pioneer to give us both a patient and a researcher's perspective.
Yeah, there are many examples of patients' treatments being stopped because funding was cut by the administration. One such instance made headlines about a young mother who learned that she had stage 4 B-cell lymphoma while she was pregnant. She started undergoing treatment, which lasted for about 2 years with no promising results. At age 24, she was supposed to join a clinical research trial called Viper in March at the NIH in Bethesda. Devastatingly, her medical team told her that was no longer an option due to funding cuts. Patients who previously were treated in that trial saw their tumors disappear, and researchers say these patients would have otherwise died within a year without the treatment.
Yeah, and I actually followed up on this one. She did appeal and got what's called compassionate use for those drugs, which is not easy to do. So it's kind of going around the system to be able to access drugs that have not been FDA approved. But we could give countless examples of how this has happened to patients across the country. And with all of the NIH, the USAID, and the PEPFAR cuts, I mean, it's literally costing millions of lives. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's tragic. It's really hard to hear about the devastating effects this has, not only in the U.S., but across the globe, especially when we understand that $7 billion spent on research funded by the NIH is the foundational science used to develop 99% of treatments on the market today. But there is hope out there. There is research that continues, and there are people who continue to fight for patients and for science.
Agreed, Brian. There is hope. There is still research out there that is ongoing, although there's suffered many, many setbacks. But one person who's been a beacon of positivity, hope, strength, and courage to me for many years, for many reasons, is our guest today. So I'd like to welcome my friend, Michelle Stump-Kerry. And Michelle, thanks so much for being here to share your expertise, your journey, and your light.
Thank you. That's such a nice intro.
Oh, it's true.
Michelle, yeah, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. You have an amazing background and life story. You're a very talented photographer and explorer, which I admire very much. You have over 25 years of experience in pharmaceutical clinical research, but I'm sure our guests would rather hear it from you than from me. So can you tell us a little bit about you and why research means so much to you?
Sure. Yeah. So I won't go all the way back to the day I was born, but my parents and family kind of instilled a love of exploring and travel and community and culture. And my brother and I, from the time we were born, and I carried that with me into adulthood and purposefully selected jobs that would include travel. Maybe the pinnacle of their sense of adventure and exploring was that we moved to Argentina when I was a preteen, just at 12. And so I had the experience of living internationally and becoming part of another country and community and making friends and realizing just how connected we all are and how much, despite the differences we seem to see, they're really minimal in the big picture. So yes, as I got older and started looking for careers, opportunities to travel became really important. And I knew I wanted to do something specifically that would benefit mankind. I thought that was going to be social work. I started off in homelessness prevention within the Hispanic Latino community in Indianapolis, Indiana. And then financially, that wasn't the most helpful thing, right? To travel and exploring. And so I learned about clinical research and saw another path to maybe not quite as directly one-on-one with individuals help, but to have an impact. And over time, that really evolved into an appreciation of just everything that goes into developing new therapies for illness and how impactful that is. My first clinical study I ever worked on was a pain study, and that study ended when 100 pancreatic cancer patients died. And I thought, wow, I'm literally doing things that can aid and contribute to the way someone experiences the end of life. It was sobering, and it was also really clarifying. And that started a journey through the profession that has brought me here 25 years later. Somewhere in that, I continued looking for ways to explore. And about 7 years ago, my wife and I bought a motorhome and set off on full-time living in an RV. And we travel the country and Canada exploring whenever we can. And that gives me a great opportunity to practice my photography skills and get to see and meet people and see this part of the world after lots of international travel.
I can't believe it's been 7 years. It just seems like yesterday you were showing us your RV and,
Yeah.
amazing it is.
Yeah, it goes fast, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to kind of preface that your passion for highlighting the importance of research and your perspective on the detrimental effects of funding cuts isn't political, but it's very much rooted in a strong understanding of the process of research.
Yeah.
And can you speak to us a little bit about that process and why any delay there really sets it back pretty significantly?
Yeah, I mean, it's so I think I'll start by saying clinical research is the foundation for what allows us to ensure that potential treatments work, do what they say they're going to do, and don't cause harm, right? And that we know how to give them, who to give them to, how to administer them and dose them. And so it is highly regulated, very after a historical start where we weren't very diligent in how we were tested and conducted research in human beings. The learnings from that have led us to a state today where it is highly controlled and very structured. I had the appreciation, or I gained the appreciation for research that I mentioned earlier through my early exposure and delving into this career, but it became particularly important for me when 2 years ago I was diagnosed with advanced ovarian cancer. And that is a cancer that is not curable in its advanced state. The 5-year survival is somewhere between 10 and 30%. And is the most deadly gynecological cancer for women. And so the hope that advanced ovarian cancer patients have really comes from the world of breakthroughs that are yet to be discovered, that are happening and are being conducted in the research space today. And that may be a hope for a cure, but more is a hope for more time. So when we take a system that is highly structured, highly regulated, supported through the US policy and funding system, unlike any other country in the world, where we have created a scientific and biomedical engine, unlike any other in the world, through the way that we fund the NIH and the research they do, that research contributes to 99% of the therapies that are on the market. And so when we take that research and break the funding, we disrupt an entire ecosystem of biomedical research. That means that researchers who have spent their whole lives researching the cellular operations and behaviors and mechanisms for a disease area and are in the middle and throes of that research, and we take away their funding, they don't have the resources needed to achieve those advances. And those disruptions can't very short-term disruptions can be tolerated, but a longer-term disruption is the results in loss of scientific knowledge, scientific data, scientific advances. And in fact, the current cuts that have taken place are estimated to reduce approvable therapies by 15% over the next several years. And that's only if they stop where they have stopped. So cutting funding ultimately means less science on which to build future treatments. And those are the treatments that bring hope and are the hope for people like me who are facing an unexpected early end to our life, right? And are just looking to contribute as much as possible with the time that we have. Yeah, yeah,
I
Well,
like how you referred to it as an ecosystem.
yes.
Right.
because it's so complex and so much
And
goes into it.
interconnected. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly
And
right.
yeah, the research, it's very complex, but the other side of the coin is that the science itself is even more complex. Like, for instance, if we just look at ovarian cancer, I read that there are 3 main types, but over 30 subtypes. So does that mean that each subtype would need to be studied separately?
It does. It does.
Wow.
It's so easy. It's so tempting, and it's something we hear a lot. I mean, Natalie, I know you've heard this in your career, where people really want to believe that the cure to cancer has been found, and it's being hidden because the pharmaceutical companies wouldn't make money if they released it. But the reality is, everyone is racing to find the cure to cancers, and we've seen tremendous strides since the mapping of the human genome and the work through immunotherapies and everything that genomic study has led to. We've been able to start pivoting our focus from generalized research to very specific focused research. And in that, we are curing cancers and extending life unlike we've ever done before. We've seen huge advances in extending the life and curing lung cancer and melanoma and pancreatic cancer, all cancers that were previously death sentences. And so that acceleration and that pace is continuing. The reason there's no one cure is that the process, cancer on its own is pretty basic. It's the proliferation, the uncontrolled proliferation of cells, right? That sounds pretty simple, but that's really what it is. And that uncontrolled proliferation keeps going and keeps going until it interferes and starts impacting the functioning of the body. What causes that proliferation of cells depends and changes with the cell that is proliferating. The mechanisms of actions, the enzymes, the way it tricks your immune system into believing it's not there, all of those pieces, it can be very unique to the individual cancer. And so in ovarian cancer with 30 subtypes, each of those subtypes could have a very specific different mechanism of action that's causing that proliferation of cells to take place. So the research has to go that deep. Historically, we have been pretty poor about funding women's health in general. It wasn't until 1993 that we required women be included in research. That was 1997, we intentionally excluded them because we were afraid of birth defects. And then it took us that many years later to realize, well, wait a minute, our bodies are different. Hormones make things different. Cells, ethnicity, diversity make things different. And we've gotten a little lost in our political landscape in the understanding of what diversity and inclusion means in the social space versus what it means in science. For good science, you have to be able to do research, take data, and extrapolate it to the general population to know if it works or not. The more homogeneous or singular your data set is, the less generalizable it is. And the consequence of that is that a drug could cause harm to someone who is not part of that group that was studied. It could take their life. It could not work. It could cause damage in other ways. And so including and ensuring that we have a robust set of resources or subjects from which we're collecting data is a requirement for good science. It is not about the social concerns that are driving some of the discourse today. It is absolutely fundamentally critical. And in women's health, that means that we need to make sure that we are doing research. All research includes robust populations of women from all backgrounds, including socioeconomic, because those are factors that influence our biology. So yes, we have to study, and that means a lot of avenues, and that means that funding is needed to do that. Without it, what will happen is that we will see a reduction in the number of potential drugs and therapies that save lives or extend lives and improve quality of life. There's certainly an economic impact to that. JAMA, the Journal of American Medicine Medical Association, just recently published a great article that goes through the financial impacts and years of lost life of the current funding cuts. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that or not. It's quite
Not
good.
from JAMA, but there, yes, there's other
There's
stuff
been
out there.
quite a bit going on. So we not only impact the development of those therapies, but we also slow the progress for the 75 to 80% of human illnesses that don't have treatments yet. So we're talking about a pretty significant impact. What happens then? Well, pharma will probably figure out how to step up. That will drive up costs because right now foundational science is what creates the building blocks of discovery that pharma then can start to look at to say, hey, maybe this is a path we pursue, and it enters their development cycle. If they have to step backwards and build on foundational science, it means one, costs will go up for treatments. We all know that we're at a limit, and so that will further exclude people from access to treatments. It will reduce the number of therapies that are actually in development because they are not entities with innumerable resources or unlimited resources. So they will have to reduce the number of agents that they put in development, and further slowing then discovery and treatment. So it has a tremendous negative impact that is, I think, to anyone in the scientific community and those adjacent to it, and an unimaginable logic to it.
Yeah, so many things to follow up on that, but I'm glad you talked about the DEI because I know that there are many universities who lost funding for research because they collected
Yep.
demographic data. And that was considered DEI, which, as you said, is absolutely positively necessary. And you also spoke to kind of the conspiracy that, oh, there's really a cure out there. But the other thing that I've heard from a lot of people who kind of say, well, this is okay, saying we can't afford it as a country. And when you look at the amount of money that was spent or that goes into the funding, it's not, I don't wanna say it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a drop in the bucket, you know? And until, like you said, you're in science, if you're in medicine, it doesn't hit home until maybe it's you or someone you
Yeah.
love. Then you're like, "Oh, now I get it," and we shouldn't have to wait for that.
That's you hit the nail on the head, Natalie. I think fundamentally, I hope that we all agree that people, regardless of policy, just as human beings, we deserve a an opportunity at life, the basics of living, right? And health is the core to that. If we are not healthy, if we do not have health, we actually do the opposite of what people are afraid of. We become a burden, right? Somebody has to take care of us. If we cannot take care of ourselves, we aren't then able to contribute to the broader community, whether that be financially or socially. We become a drain. That if we are not motivated by the quality of life and the notion that everyone deserves to have a high quality of life, meaning health and the ability to do something positive with their life because they are healthy, then, and our motivator is financial, then we have to also look at the financial impacts to our society of having an unhealthy population.
Exactly.
Either of those mean, all of those mean that this isn't an expense that we can't afford. It is a drop in the bucket, just like you said. It is nothing compared to the things that we spend money on, and everything to achieving that goal of a healthy society. And the financial, the estimate I was reading is over the next 25 years with these current cuts, not considering cuts in later years, is somewhere along the order of $8 trillion, where the proposed cuts of $20 billion next year from NIH only amount to ultimately a $500 billion impact. So you tell me, financially, which is more impactful. But to me, it comes down, and it comes down to, who do we want to be as a society,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
what do we allow ourselves to value? And I'd rather cut something else than the access and opportunity for people to live healthy lives as long as they can.
Yeah, I can't understand how, if we're talking about the oligarchs or whoever, the millionaire class that's driving these policies, how they believe that life will be better for them if you don't have a happy, healthy, productive society in general. They
Yeah.
didn't achieve their millions and billions with a sick and poor society beneath them that couldn't, there were the building blocks of what allowed them to have the wealth and the privilege they have today.
Yeah.
So they're totally missing the benefits that they receive from this society when they start robbing from that society to enrich themselves. And that's just something that talk about not having a big picture view or understanding, talk about an ecosystem, how that ecosystem works.
Yeah. Yeah, I not being one of the folks that has that, I have to imagine that there are positions they have that we
Me neither.
don't understand.
Right. I don't.
But and entities on all sides politically have made horrible mistakes and decisions along the way, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
we are accelerating that decision making now, and we've turned a corner into maybe more overt decision, overt arm twisting that we are not used to seeing. But at the end of the day, we will all hurt from some of these decisions. At the end of the day, the impact will be felt by all of us. And maybe that is what's necessary. Maybe this, I tell people who feel very distraught and distressed, as I often find myself feeling about the changing fabric of our community and our society as a priorities as a country, that we get to choose our fate. We are choosing the direction that we go as a humanity. And sometimes we realize the impact of what we do by living it and creating our own pain.
Mess.
And that's where we will make choices that are different. And I feel like that's what we've done. Our
Yes.
community has spoken, and we need to learn from our choices. And this is how we're going to learn from it. But it is not without consequence all along the way.
And your work kind of came full circle with your life. So you and I have worked in research for a long time, decades.
Yeah,
And I right?
No, not decades.
I
it's
Can't
know.
be.
decades.
But I think it's important to point out that only 10 to 20% of drugs that actually make it to a clinical trial ultimately get approved by the FDA. So it has roughly a 90% failure rate, and cancer drugs are even a lower probability rate of approval. But you actually found yourself taking a drug that you helped develop. Is that right?
I did.
Wow.
I was part of the development of a drug it was the generic name is olaparib, but the brand name is Lynparza. And I was at AstraZeneca when we were going through phase 1. So the
Oh,
research of
wow.
medications has different phases of development. The first phase is focused on finding dosing, right? What are the limits of dosing? It's not about whether or not it works. It's you're looking at that, but your primary focus is what is the right dose that the human body tolerates well and with minimal impact. And in cancer, side effects are a significant occurrence. And so then the second phase is when you start looking at, is it impactful? Does it work? And did we really get to the right dose? And so there's continued adjustments. And then that third phase is really about, does it work widely? So that's where you're getting it into lots of people, exposure to lots of people, and looking at the impact of what's happening. What are the side effects that are taking place and adverse events? And are the results showing, does the data show that it works or not? And if it doesn't, anytime it doesn't, you want it out, right? You cut it from development, and that's what Natalie was just talking about there. So I worked on this drug olaparib in phase 1 when we were doing dose finding, and we had 4 women with ovarian cancer. I remember reading the protocols and working with the scientists and thinking to myself, man, I hope I never have this. This is a nasty, nasty cancer. And then I ended up leaving the company shortly after the first results were shown. It's a great example of a drug that did not work generally for the entire population. It was a breakthrough drug, first of its kind. It was getting a lot of attention at national cancer research conferences and association because of the mechanism it was targeting, which is to impact or reduce the availability of a protein that those cancer cells use to grow from, right, and to reproduce from.
Yeah.
And so but we were doing genetic testing. So this is way back in the early 2000s. We were collecting genetic specimens from patients who consented and doing research on those patients. And what we were able to see is that the drug worked really well for women who had a certain genetic mutation called BRCA. It's a gene that when it works well, it helps to kill errant cells, and when it doesn't, it allows them to flourish. And that particular gene is connected to breast cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, and ovarian cancer in women who have the mutation. And so we saw
Yeah.
that it worked really well for those women, and it also worked really well in tumors that had developed their own genetic mutation. So not from the women's inherited genes, but what the cancer cells themselves have their own genetic profile. And if they're HRD positive, which is the gene, then that drug seemed to work well with those cancers. And so my cancer was HRD positive. I was not BRCA positive. I do not have that gene inherited from my family, but my cancer did have the mutation. And so once I participated in a research study to look at residual cancer cells, and when we saw that I did have them, and in about half of the 15 biopsies they took in that study, we paired that drug together with another immunotherapy drug. In the last 20, I'm on cycle 24 now, so 24 cycles, which happens every 3 weeks, my cancer has stayed stable. It's not continued to grow.
It's
So
amazing.
it has given me
Wow.
a tremendous amount of time that I would not have had, and in a quite quality of life as well. I'm not the same. I can't do what I used to do and don't have the energy I used to have, but I've gotten to do some really incredible things in this time. And it had started to grow back right after my last chemo. So I
Oh,
would
well.
not be standing or sitting, I guess, as it is today, talking with you were it not for those two drugs. So yeah, pretty
Yes.
cool to take something you had a little hand in.
Yes.
Wow.
My God.
Yeah. Michelle, you're also working with an organization called the Innovation Network. Can you tell us about that organization and the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be invited to speak with them. So the Innovation Network Gathering is a life sciences clinical research group of leaders around the industry. It's a small set of leaders and decision makers who are interested in innovating within our space. And they come together every year in Westchester, Pennsylvania, take over the town. And the whole focus is on driving action and innovation. And so they curate thought-provoking speeches and or talks, unlike a conference where you'd go and sit to listen to someone talk for 45 minutes and then leave and go home and you're done. They work with the speakers to create short TED Talk style talks on stage, and then the rest of that time, second half of that time, is working with those leaders to in dive teams to find solutions and to come up with innovative ideas and then pursue those after the conference. And so the result of that group has been a number of really creative and exciting activities, from foundations being created. Now they're working, one of the big ones out of this year is they're working to create a trial navigation service for patients to locate trials, and that will connect them in human to human to clinical trials and track them and support them in that, leveraging technology and the human touch. There is been some great research on the importance of compensating patients fairly for the data they contribute to a trial and disproving some of the previous beliefs the industry has had around that. So it's a really fantastic group to be a part of. They're approaching things in a way we don't see in most parts of business, but especially in the very conservative clinical research space, because we are all wanting to make sure that patients are safe. And so when we found a way that does that, we get stuck on it. And sometimes it means we stop being creative, and they're pushing the envelope to maintain safety while establishing creativity. So yeah, it's a
Wow.
great,
Sounds
great
great.
group.
And, I did want to take a minute to just have the opportunity for you to share some potentially life-saving information about ovarian cancer, the risks, the signs, the symptoms, things like that, if you don't mind, because like you said, it's, I'll probably cut this out, but, it's kinda like a sneaky bitch, like, it's like
It
it's
is.
it's hard to detect.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's called the silent killer for a reason. Most cases, 86% of cases of ovarian cancer are not discovered until they're in advanced stages. And
Mm,
that's the
Wow.
point where they are not curable. They're somewhat treatable in the beginning. There's been some great um, there's some great treatments that tend to work on about 80% of patients initially, where they see what appears to be the majority of their cancer disappear. But it's a highly adaptive, really, I don't know, intelligent isn't the right word, but let's go with resilient cancer. And so it develops resistance very quickly. Thus, it comes back quickly. And so it does that in cycles, ever decreasing cycles until it takes your life. And so The unfortunate side is that maybe the good news story there is that one of those agents, there's two agents women take when they're first diagnosed. Everybody gets these agents when they have the most aggressive form, which is high-grade serous ovarian carcinoma, and it is what most women have. Those treatments, one was a treatment discovered from the needle of a fir particular tree in the Northwest that in the early 60s, the government funded explorers to go out and collect samples from nature of things that might have cancer fighting properties. So an explorer goes out and collected this sample, brought it back, and after several years, they started testing it and found that it really did have these strong properties. And ultimately, after a long history of ups and downs with securing enough supply, it took 30 years to develop, but it became one of the leading treatments for ovarian cancer and breast cancer. So it is a cancer you want to catch early. The unfortunate side to that is there are no screening tests. You cannot go get a test that tells you whether or not you have those cells. It's not like a pap smear in cervical cancer. So that means it's up to women right now. We need the research to look for screening capabilities, and there's a lot that was in motion, some of which has been impacted by the funding cuts. But we need to keep looking for screening mechanisms. But until then, it's on women to be incredibly diligent and tuned into their own bodies. And so there's a great acronym for women to remember to help them notice what the signs and symptoms might be of ovarian cancer. And it's beach. Like, I'm going to go to the beach and hang out for the day in the sand. The B is for bloating. So if you notice an increase in bloating, that's a sign that you may want to start having something checked. If you start early, the E is for early satiety or feeling full early. So if you find that you're having a bite to eat and your stomach feels full much sooner than normal, that is a sign that you want to pay attention to. The A is for abdominal discomfort. So if you notice a discomfort in your abdomen that is unusual and lasts for more than a few days, usually a week or two, that would be something to go have checked out. C is for changes in bowels or bladder habits. So again, pay attention to any changes that are happening there. And H is for heightened fatigue. What does that mean? If you're having those symptoms, the reason you would have those symptoms is because something is growing and putting pressure on things, right? And that causes a change in how they operate. So, and there's swelling that can create. So that's why that discomfort, why your hunger may change, why your bowels or your bladder habits might change. But it's also important for women to go to their doctors, who, especially younger women, and listen to their bodies and insist on testing. It's very common for doctors that have not had a lot of education around ovarian cancer to dismiss the symptoms. And I have met so many women who it took a year for diagnosis, and by the time they were truly diagnosed, they were too advanced. It has a really high rate of success when it's discovered early. So if you feel those symptoms and you go to your doctor, some things you can ask for are a test for a CA-125. It's a cancer antigen that's correlated to ovarian cancer. It looks for inflammation. Just because you might have an elevated cancer CA-125 test does not mean you have ovarian cancer, but it is a sign that would inform further evaluation. They can do pelvic ultrasounds as a way to look then for growths, or further CT or PET scans. Usually it would progress in that order: CA-125, then an ultrasound, and then a CT or PET scan. If you feel like there is something wrong with your body, insist that they evaluate it. I personally believe I'd rather sit with the discomfort a few weeks of not knowing and being stressed, especially if I did a CA-125 and it comes back elevated and I'm waiting to get in for an ultrasound. I would rather sit with that discomfort temporarily and be wrong than to dismiss it and it be too late.
Very good advice. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for sharing that.
great.
I was gonna ask you if there were biomarkers, but it sounds like that C125 is there.
It's the closest that we have right now. There are a few others that can be looked at, but they're less common and not yet. We don't yet have one that is a direct connection.
Do you think that there could be a point that it would be a good thing to advise for preliminary screening at age 30? You have that taken. What's it's going to hurt,
Yeah,
right?
why haven't they done it? I mean, the reason they don't do it is because There are different reasons it can elevate, and I think there's a constant weighing in the healthcare community between the anxiety that is created and the impact of making a recommendation like that. And it's not direct enough to hit the category. And there's cost associated with it too. It's not that much though. One can, I mean, depending on who you are, you can go to a LabCorp testing site and order the CA-125 yourself. It's like $125. You know, if you have enough means, that is well worth the time, as long as you just take a big breath should it come back elevated until you find out. What they don't want to do is clog the system with, and this is why I think they don't do it, is they don't want to clog the system, given that it is a fairly rare cancer. They don't want to clog the system with testing that is keeping no other testing from happening. But as someone who is sitting in the side of rare, to me, I think the blood test is worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about a lot of heavy topics. Yes. So before we let you go, we'll wrap it up. We always like to do a quick, fun lightning round with all of our guests. 5 quick, fun questions. If you're up for that.
I am. This is fun.
All right. Sounds good. All right. You and Alyssa, you've traveled all over the country. And this is kind of like asking you, what is your favorite song? I think it's probably impossible to answer. But what has been your favorite stop so far?
It is hard to answer, but I have to say Alaska. We spent last summer in Alaska, and it was amazing. And I could live there if it weren't dark in the winter and cold.
Yeah. You're sitting in Florida now, loving the sun.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the winter of 16 here, Michelle. 16.
I know. I'm sorry. I just feel like I should apologize. I wore long sleeves for you just to not make you feel bad.
Well, it's going to be almost 60 tomorrow, so don't worry about it. We're good.
Okay, good.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
The universe is smiling on you.
Yeah, something's happening.
Second question, you're always so positive, but what is your favorite way to celebrate a win?
Oh, I do a happy dance. Happy dance. I do a little happy dance. It's nothing pretty, it's nothing fun, but that is seriously, yeah. If that, assuming it can be that trivial, but it is really always a little happy dance.
It's a little thing.
And maybe a little song I make up along the way.
All right, kind of along those same lines. What is one tip you would give someone interested on living life on the road?
Do it.
Do it.
Don't keep being, people have so many doubts when they think about it. I talk to people all the time, and there's this fear that gets in their way. Just step past the fear. You'll figure it out. If your heart is calling you to live on the road, find a way to do it and just do it. The rest sorts itself out. You are resourceful enough, capable enough. You'll get it. Just make it happen.
All righty. This was a little out of the box, but you're a wildlife photographer. I've seen some of your work and it's extraordinary. But if animals could talk, which one that you have photographed would you have wanted to chat with?
Oh, that's a hard question.
I know.
Because there are so many. I can think of so many of the animals, that the wise owl or the regal elk. I think the one that comes to mind most is there was last summer in Alaska, there was a grizzly that there had been a moose calf kill, which is never fun to talk about, but this is nature and it is wild. And so after, what happens when there's a kill is grizzlies come from all over to partake. And there's this big giant guy who had eaten his meal and he was just slumbering, taking a big nap. I watched him for a long time and he got up and he walked to the river and he laid down in it and he just slumbered around. And I just feel like he was the kind of guy I would like to sit down and say, tell me about your day. Tell me how you did it. Yeah. So probably the grizzly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that had to be something to see.
It was incredible. I also would never sit close to a grizzly because they are dangerous, but
I wondered how were you through a lens then watching him?
Through a lens, yeah, at a nice distance.
When we were in Alaska, we saw like 6 grizzlies, and I love them. I love the Fat Bear Week. If you've been Fat Bear Week, follow them. I love them. So I think I'd want to talk to a bear as well. All right, last question. I think I might know just from your happy dance, but if you had to be one character for this holiday season, would it be Buddy the Elf or Snoopy from A Charlie Brown Christmas?
Well, funny because I think I would say Buddy the Elf.
Yeah?
Which is different than you might expect for Snoopy, because Snoopy is cute, but Buddy, just in his total goofy, naive, ignorant self, I think just set things on kilter a little bit, kept everybody on a different plane of reality and seemed to, I decided, bring joy. Maybe they did it. Maybe they found it annoying, but
And,
I don't
and
know.
he could go to the North Pole. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
He was just the eternal optimist, and I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And
Michelle, yeah, I love that. I think my animal I would have to say would have been the chipmunk because I just want to find out if he talks like Alvin, because that was one of my favorite cartoons growing up was Alvin and the Chipmunks. We had like, their Christmas album that we used to listen to, which I'm sure my parents were like, no. But
That's great.
anyway,
That's
so
great.
thanks so much for joining us today. It was really informative
Pleasure.
and fascinating, and I think really beneficial and insightful for our listeners, around the research process and how important that foundational research is. And we admire your courage, and you are an inspiration, and we just wish you the
Thank
best on
you.
your travels and your life journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. And as you know, we like to end each of our podcasts with a call to action. My call to action for you is to get involved. Contact your legislators and let them know that you support research funding, and find an organization that you want to support and join the fight. I always say you can lend your time, talent, or treasure to causes that are important. So if you do have the means to contribute financially, the National Center for Health Research and its Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund have been designated as one of America's best charities. But find what speaks to you and join the fight to make a difference.
Yeah, that's great. Natalie, that's a great organization, a great charity. I hope everybody, take a look at that and donate if they can. Our activism and getting out there and making sure that we fight for the changes that we need to be really important. So we just want to thank everyone again for listening in. And don't forget, you can join the conversation at our Facebook and Instagram pages or at blue.podcast.com. And if you like listening to our podcast, consider donating to help fund it, which you can do by clicking on the donate link at blue.podcast.com.
That's right. And until next time, stay curious, keep the facts in focus, never stop fighting for what matters. Peace out, everybody.